I started participating in spiritual direction in a rather unusual way, I think. I had signed up about 10 years ago for the Renovare Spiritual Formation Institute and didn't realize that one of the requirements was going to be that we would participate in spiritual direction and engage a spiritual director for the time we were in the institute. And at first, when I heard about it, my immediate thought was, how can I get out of this requirement, or how can I get around this? I was skeptical about what it could do. Spiritual direction wasn't really in vogue at all 10 years ago much. It was kind of coming back in a little bit. And I just was resistant to the idea and thought, this is just not what I signed up for. I don't want to do this. Please don't make me do this. But it was a requirement, and I kind of leaned into the requirement, thought it's part of what they want you to do. It's the benefit you're going to get from the process. So without a ton of thought or reflection, I just came back to the Seattle area where we were living and looked up the spiritual directors and found out there was one not too far from the church where I was working. And we did a short interview and just said, do you think this will work? Yeah, you're good enough, you're close. And I started meeting with John. And I thought, well, this can't be bad. You meet with a person who's really wise and spiritual and really in tune to what God's doing. And so as I start talking about what's happening at church, I'll get some really good coaching that'll help me be a better pastor and take our church to the next level. And as I was engaging this process, I found out very quickly that wasn't spiritual direction at all. And I wasn't getting a lot of help on those kind of strategic things, but I was gradually being drawn back into thinking about my relationship, my walk with Christ personally. So it really went from a professional idea of how to do ministry better to a personal idea of how to be in relationship to God in a more intimate way. And I found that to be just a time that really grew, and I grew to anticipate that time. The day before I would go in for my spiritual direction meeting, I think I did most of my spiritual formation work thinking, what's happened in the last month? What do I want to talk about? What do I want to share? What do I feel like God has been doing in my life? And I would walk in, and often I would start with a story I thought that was maybe most prominent, and I had two or three that I would walk through in my mind. And by the time the first story was done, the conversation had gone in a whole different direction. That wasn't what God had the appointment for that day. And as we finished, I just left with a sense of God's grace and God's gratitude, moving so many ways. I just left virtually every spiritual formation meeting I had with a sense of gratitude for how God is leading and directing. And the 18-month period came up when I had fulfilled the requirement for the Institute, and I can remember the day I left John's office and said, John, I don't have to come back and see you again. I fulfilled my requirement. But if it's okay, I'd like to keep meeting, because I know that the things that have happened and the growth in my life would regress very quickly if I didn't maintain this discipline in my life. And that was very fortuitous. I kept going back to him, and it wasn't but a couple of years later when I went through a season in ministry where it just was filled with a lot of doubt and frustration, disappointment and heartache, and you just start kind of shaking the foundations of what you're doing and where's God at and why is this going on? And I really believe that my spiritual direction appointment was one of the key things that God used to help keep me on track and keep me safe and sane, even spiritually and personally, going through that time. And I'm extremely grateful for that. And I just found that as I would meet with John and I would talk with him and share with him, he wasn't a part of our Reformed church tradition, so he had no influence or control over my life or direction. And so I could share with him completely openly and honestly, and just open up my heart, and he would listen just unconditionally and reflect back. And even the things that maybe I was kind of stupid about, didn't get critiqued or criticized for, but he just listened to that and gave me some feedback and helped me to kind of think through those things. He created that safe space where I could just be fully present to God, and he would just, in that space with me, listen and reflect back to me and help me in my faith journey and in my personal faith formation, my trust and confidence in where God was leading and guiding throughout my life. I think the other thing I've discovered about spiritual direction is that I've often engaged in a lot of things that were sort of short-term. You go to a one-time conference, a one-week seminar, weekend retreat, and you think, well, this will be kind of a quick fix. And spiritual direction, you could do it for a season, but I'm really convinced it's a discipline for your life. It's something you want to begin to engage and practice and stay attuned to, because God's going to keep using it and your life's going to keep growing and morphing and changing. We're not going to be complete in Christ until our last day on earth. And I feel like I need that ongoing direction. So I went from a person who doubted there could be any value whatsoever to where I see this as one of the essential disciplines of my life now, and I'm very grateful for it. And I would encourage anyone to explore and engage and at least try spiritual direction and just see if God wouldn't shape and form and touch your heart in very meaningful and significant ways.